Moral Revolution community, welcome back to our podcast. I'm so glad you joined us today. We're going to dive into all things God's design for healthy sexuality. Let's talk about it.
Hey, let's talk about it, listeners. We are excited for today's episode. We have special guests, our friends Aaron and Jenna Zint, today to tell us a little bit of their story, and it is sure to impact you, or you're going to want to share with one of your friends or family members.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about pornography in relationships, both dating, marriage, the impacts of it. How do you overcome it? How do you respond to each other? And Aaron and Jenna have been just so courageous and brave. I mean, I say it, then again, you guys do it so much. Is it even courage anymore? But really thankful that you guys are willing to share this part of your life with people, because it just, man, it brings so much freedom for people that are going through it and don't want to share it. So to let the cat out of the bag, the reason that you guys are here for this podcast is it's a part of your story.
Yeah. So I had struggled with porn since I was a kid, and going into when we got married, I was 21, she was 23, 24, something around that. But I had a couple years of when I had first met the Lord where I was like, oh man, I've got this thing dialed in. I'm good, because I was so full of passion and zeal and running with people, and I didn't have much issue with it for a couple of years. But then after this period of time, there was like slowly but surely started like making small compromises that got bigger over time, until I was back in the throes of being addicted to porn. And for me, everyone's got a cycle. And so there's some guys, their cycle is like daily, and some guys, their cycle is weekly. Mine happened to be like once every 3 months. It was kind of the cycle I'd go in. So, so I could tell myself after a couple months, especially compared to a lot of guys, oh man, I'm good, man. I could write a whole sermon on this. I could preach to the world about how to do this. And then every 3 months, I just hit this, hit this time where I would slip up. I would look at porn, whatever. And so when we were dating, we had talked about this, because when I ever had a slip up, I would confess it to her, and through tears, like I'm genuinely.
I think we should mention too, though, it was like shocking to me when I found out that you looked at porn, because I had no sexual experience, never dated anyone, didn't look at porn, and I think growing up too, like it felt like the ultimate sin. So like when I heard about like the first night, I needed like space. I'm like it was just like, I don't know. Is this a deal breaker? It almost like everything
you're dating
shifted
at this point.
Yes, totally. And I was like, I've done all the things, and then like, is this going to ruin our marriage? Is this like? Oh yeah. It was really big.
Yeah. I want to pause because I don't want to run past the statement you made, and I feel like we're going to do that. Like, I'd love for you to explain the cycle that you just referenced really quickly.
Sure.
Because I think that alone might give some help to some people.
Not every guy is taking time to stop to recognize this, and I work with enough guys to have seen this, but if you take time to go, how often do I look at porn, and what precedes each of these times, you'll recognize there's a pattern to this. Like, we do the same thing over and over, the same triggers, the same like steps that lead up to acting out typically look the same as well. Even if the situations are different, we have it's the same engine and the same mode that goes programming that turns back on. And so for me, I had it was a buildup of pressure emotionally, internally, around a number of different things that once I hit a 3-month time frame, I felt enough pressure that I would start to take these little steps that were so benign that nobody could say these were wrong, but these were the steps that eventually led me to acting out in some way. So every guy's got that kind of cycle. He just has to take time to identify it.
That's really great.
It's interesting because, since we've been married and Aaron wrote a book and speaks about it, people talk about it more. And the thing I hear from women is, oh, my husband doesn't have a problem with porn. He just looks at it like twice a year, or like maybe he slips up every 12. So it was Aaron who actually, when he went there was like a group at our church after we got married to get some help with his like support with his porn problem. I was like, why are you going? You don't have a problem. It's once every 3 months. That's not a problem. That's not an addict. I almost thought like there was this line of addiction where so now like it was role reversal for us, where the most marriages was like, hey, none is okay. Like, I actually don't want this in my life at all. So anything's a problem. And I realized like I had to kind of like assess myself. I was like, oh, I feel some shame that my husband's dealing with this. So him going means I have to own it and maybe talk about it. And I wasn't ready. So like I almost wasn't ready for him to go, but I'm so glad he did. And the interesting part is now, like when other people talk about like actually changing the verbiage, like, hey, that is a problem. If he every 6 months for however long, like that's an addiction. It's a longer cycle, but it is a cycle.
Our friend Jason had told us when we were discussing this, he's like, hey, Jenna, how often is it okay for Aaron to cheat on you? Like, how are you good with that? Just a couple times a year? Like, and in just really what's happening in my heart and different things like that. So like, we're not trying to make something a problem that isn't. We're trying to help pull you out of a place that you're going like, no, it's fine. I'm just drinking poison every once in a while.
So explain why porn's an issue.
Yeah, I mean, besides, there's lots of research that actually will show it's damaging to the brain. It's damaging to relationships. So we have research to back this up. A neuro cocktail of what the same effect that drugs are having on a person, as well as it literally shrinking your brain in different parts that help with executive functioning. Besides all that stuff, if you've decided that this isn't something I want to do, and for most Christian guys, they're like, and women, I don't want to do this, and you keep going back to it, that's your signal that there's something bigger going on behind the scenes. That's the check engine light. You're like, oh, I got to get rid of this light. No, you actually need to look at the engine and see what's happening behind the scenes.
What if you can get to the point where you've decided you do want to do it? Yeah. And be a Christian, and your spouse is okay with it? How would that be detrimental?
It can be detrimental for all the research reasons because of the ways that porn, it programs your brain for novelty, and it programs your brain for connecting, bonding with the vasopressin, serotonin, and the endorphins that are running, the cocktail that's running in your head to bond to images. And because of something called the Coolidge effect, which when you have the same kind of stimulation, especially when it's a super stimulant like porn, the same way that like drugs are a super stimulant, it gives you a dump of dopamine in your brain that is unnatural in the real world.
Yeah. So like almost to like simplify it, makes you not like content or as satisfied with normal sex.
It removes your ability to enjoy normal, to enjoy a person, to enjoy intimacy with another person. It actually decreases your brain's ability to have intimacy with another human being.
And almost the need, because you always say that it takes away vulnerability, because it's like it gets, you kind of feel known without actually having to be risked.
Porn is intimacy without any of the risk involved. And intimacy, in order to be intimacy, requires risk. It requires that I give you a part of myself that you're allowed to reject if you decide to. And nobody has ever rejected me from behind a computer screen. And no images have ever rejected me. So.
It reminds me too of like the difference between eating a piece of cake and then going to eat an apple. Like the cake, like white sugar is a super stimulant too, where it just is unnatural. So like the natural version is not appealing. Like it's so like, oh, okay. So that's what I feel like porn with, like, you can, but like it makes it less appealing because it's now an unnatural. You're like.
So speak, Jenna, like from your perspective, you meant a couple things you've said so far is like shame, you felt shame. And like, I'd love to hear more about how like you have been impacted by these moments, these cycles that Aaron's went through, both pre-marriage, marriage. Like I'd love to hear from your perspective on that.
I think, well, one thing for me, even just understanding like pre-marriage, like, oh, okay, like I want him to be able to get whole and pursue wholeness and like not using porn, but unrealistic that it's going to just magically stop. I think a lot of women think that when sex is on the table and fair game, if their spouse struggles with porn, it won't stop. True. So it's this weird tension of like not being hopeless, but then also being realistic of like, almost like it felt like I would get my hope, bigger rejection. Like we'll meet with couples who are like, I thought it would stop, and now 6 months into marriage, it hasn't. What does that mean about me? So I think that's where I did the like,
I'm not enough.
Yeah, I'm not enough. Do I not know any, like, I don't know, tricks? Pretty enough? Does my body? It actually can spiral your partner into like the shame of what does it mean about me if what we have isn't enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's like it's a narrative on you.
Yeah. And then two, like if so betrayed and not understanding, like it was just so, every time he confessed, I would be sad and cry. It was this weird tension of like not wanting to, I don't know, how do you think I...
Well, she didn't want to make me feel worse than I had already felt, because actually...
But I didn't want to protect him either. Yeah. That weird tension of like, not like, hey, so I think now, if he does occasionally...
Like, I want to leave you in jail overnight.
Yeah, no, totally. I don't want to rescue from this.
So this idea of like, oh, I'm not going to hide him. I think I used to try to maybe shut down my emotions because he felt so much shame that I didn't want to add to it. But I was like, that's unfair. Like I get to have my emotions, but I'm also not going to I don't know, punish? What
Yeah, that's literally what you've said to me before. Like, hey, this is all the stuff that I feel. I have no desire to punish you with this. I know it might feel it's probably gonna feel like punishment. And so,
well, I mean, for me, it hurts so bad.
Yes,
so like, I'm gonna tell you how bad it hurts, but I'm also not trying to punish you as well. But for me, even like getting out of the shame of talking about it, I heard a stat once that like 7 in 10 men in the church struggle. So the idea, like, that was like, oh, I think this is like a tactic from the enemy to like have us not talk about it, when the stats say that probably 7 of my friends' husbands are struggling with the same thing. Like, none of us are talking about it because we're trying to cover our husband. But then actually, like, I feel isolated, and we're getting, the attack is like heightened versus actually being vulnerable with a friend. So we had people that I would actually like, hey, I need people I can process with this. Who's on your list that you feel safe with, that I'm not hiding? Because then it enables the hiding cycle too.
Yeah, and if my answer had been nobody, don't tell anybody, that's the wrong answer.
That's a red flag.
One of the primary causes of porn is isolation and the loneliness you feel within that, and the need to feel the comfort when you feel really isolated. And so trying to, if you want freedom, you want your wife to tell as many people that she can feel known by. So as many people as that's possible. Like, not just for me, there was a couple people I'm like, oh, I know they love both of us, and they're not going to commiserate with her and like, wow, he's so horrible. But they are going to feel the pain with her, and they are going to bring her to a place where she feels known. And so that, and I need that. I need her to feel known by other people.
And the interesting part, I feel like most of the time Aaron would like want, like, hey, like, this is what I'm doing. This is my action steps on some level of like not getting here again. But then there were some times that he felt so much shame. It was almost like he was like crippled by passivity,
which
I see some husbands that are like the wife's like, he just doesn't even know where to start. So the idea of like, oh, okay, I see that. I will need you to make a plan. I'm not going to feel safe if you're just letting passivity tell you what to do.
Totally.
So it's not like a punishing, but like there needs to be some action steps. Like, let me know. And then two, I think sometimes I would err on the side of trying to control, like, this is what you can do to make me feel safe. But then the external controls were never. It's like, when you get out of school, if the rules aren't there, you're not like, it's not internal. So him being like, hey, let me know. I'll need something. Can you tell me today? If you don't know right now, could you circle back and think of some stuff by tomorrow evening? Can we talk about it? But not actually like, you know what I mean? Like
Were
defining his jail sentence.
The plan
Oh yeah, tried to a couple times. Not helpful.
How did you forgive?
Oh gosh.
Because if you had to forgive more than once.
Yeah. Okay, this is gonna sound so cheesy, but I feel this conviction with Jesus of like, I've been forgiven much, so I need to forgive much. And watching him, like, he's a good man, and I know he wants to not stay here. So me being on his team, to not have like, hey, you're better than this, and I know you're better than this. I'm gonna stick with you, like, but I believe more for you. It's kind of, I feel like, where I like the camp I'm in.
Yeah, which was massively freeing and gave me a ton of hope that I'm not just doing this by myself. Like, I actually have somebody who's in my corner, rooting for me. And I remember telling her in one of these times, like, I want to tell you I'll never do it again, but I just feel so hopeless. I've done this so many times. And she goes, okay, well, can you try for that? And it was just a simple statement that, in the moment, I didn't have fireworks go off in my head, but what I did have was, oh yeah, I would think I've been waiting. This is the passivity showing up. I think I've been waiting for it to be so bad, or for some external thing to help pull me out of this. When in reality, she goes, can you try for that? I realized, oh, I have to do something. Like, the difference between guys who are stuck in their cycle and guys who have found freedom for whatever length of time that looks like is that they did something different afterwards. And so for me, that there was a number of steps that I took, and I list some of those out in my book, and steps that guys can take, but it took a lot of intentional action steps. And so for me doing that, also knowing that she is rooting for me, she's not going, hey, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. She's not like pulling that off.
She's not saying it's okay.
Yeah. So people make changes in their life because of either pain or vision. And I had a ton of pain that was motivating me there. But her kind of like belief in me gave me vision that once the pain stopped, I didn't lose my motivation. Like, I had something to fight for, because we have a marriage that we want to protect. I have a life that I'm excited to live. And it really helped to her have that kind of boost behind her, but it took a lot of Jesus, and it took a lot of talking to other people as well.
And then honestly too, like, I have coping mechanisms of my own. They're not porn, but like, that I have a hard time ditching. Like, I've been trying to, honestly, like, excessive amount of sugar, which I know it's not the same thing in the sense that it doesn't affect him the same way, but I'm like, I've wanted and made so many vows to turn it down, to eat healthier,
So it just
wholer
helps you
food.
relate.
Yeah,
to
I'm
it.
like, I get the idea of
Yep.
how hard it is to turn something down, or to like break a pattern and a habit that has been a solution for a problem for like your whole life. So I'm like, okay, I have hope for me, so I have hope for you, but we do need to go after this. Like,
Yeah, it's a really good job of forgiving without giving permission.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can feel like to forgive is to give permission to do
Right.
again.
Sure. Yeah.
that's true.
And it feels like you guys have really done a great job of figuring out how do we communicate how we feel without it feeling like an indictment or an attack.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to just even speak to that, even if it ventures away from the porn conversation. Because I find, especially younger marriages, like newer marriages, as we're learning to communicate. Like I think of our first years of marriage, it was like, we weren't resolving, we were attacking,
Sure, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we were trying to be right,
Yeah.
you know. I imagine that commitment to attack and not resolve you guys wouldn't be married at this point still, if that stayed. Like I'd love for you guys just to kind of speak to that a bit.
Sure. Forgiveness in general, like the idea of wanting, if you recognize this is really hard to forgive, and typically that fear is coming out of a place of self-protection at some point. So like,
Yep.
if I was to forgive, here's what I'm afraid would happen, is that he would feel like he is no longer responsible to manage this. And so when you realize, oh, I'm taking responsibility for his walk by withholding forgiveness, it's under this general idea that punishment is what gets people better.
Yeah.
So this is part of what
I know, I was like, I actually thought that was good. He's not said that before.
Punishment does not make people better. Okay, note taken.
So Romans 5:4 says it's the kindness of God that leads to repentance.
Yeah.
And if we understand repentance to be change, I'm going this way and now I'm going this way, and it's his kindness that gets us there, and it wasn't his threat and it wasn't his anger.
Wow.
It's actually him deciding, the cross was the punishment that we've taken care of the punishment side. Danny Silk's got a ton of resources on
Yeah,
this,
he does.
a book called Unpunishable, and getting this inside of ourselves to go, oh, you know what? As much as I want to self-protect using punishment, I realize it doesn't work. It never has.
So good.
The law was meant to like, hey, here's the punishments for these things. And also that didn't work. All it did was make you more aware of what wasn't working. And then Jesus goes, okay, actually, here's kindness, here's grace. And if grace and kindness is what he's given us, that has to be what gets us better. So her grace and kindness were actually catalysts for me finding wholeness and reaching a point where I can go like, oh, wow, I feel like I have the tools to choose something different. Whereas before it felt like the only solution out of all the other solutions that were possible.
So what I hear is basically Jenna's the best ever.
Oh, 110%.
Actually, it feels like on some level I learned that like withholding or punishing him, I had tried that to get my needs met, to feel safe.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I actually learned that like connection is how I get my needs met.
Wow.
So it's the opposite of like withholding keeps me safe. It's actually drawing in is where I'm going to find safety and be known and get my needs met. So it feels so counterintuitive. But I mean, everything about Christianity is, right?
Yeah.
So like, oh, that's what I'm going to protect is our connection.
Okay, you got to tell us about the book.
Yes.
I will admit I haven't read it. However,
He hasn't read my book.
I don't need.
Okay, you need a tiny
It's
habit.
the beautiful thing about knowing someone. I don't need to read it to know what's in this because I know
The
you
wife's book,
well.
not Aaron's book.
Oh yeah, I read yours. Didn't I?
No.
I've read a lot of it.
Remind me?
I've read some of it. All right, but here's the book. MoralRevolution.com. You can buy it there.
He's
So is
such a good
everyone.
man of white.
I'd love for you just to talk about this.
Yeah.
Where they can get it. Because like this is so important. I was so excited when I heard you were writing this because of how many people we talk to that need this.
Yeah.
And to do it from your experience, and you're basically a psychologist now. He's not really, but he's like self-taught himself into being
It
a
is true.
psychologist.
So many books.
So yeah, I'd love for you just to talk about that for
Yeah,
me.
so just a quick overview. My history in porn, but also what I realized that I had always thought porn is the problem that I need to fix. And then when I realized, oh, porn is my solution to this problem. And if that's my solution, then I need to ask, what is the real problem? If I can handle and work on the thing that is actually propping up my porn use, I can crumble this thing from the foundation rather than trying to pull it down from up here.
It's so good.
So the things that I've identified within myself and working with guys over for
a decade?
a number of years, is isolation, passivity, and pain. There's going to be more than just that, but like honing it down to these three, I know that every man who has struggled with porn has lived in some level of isolation and feeling disconnected from himself, disconnected from God, but honestly, primarily disconnected from others, because it's such a shame-filled experience that we want to turn inward. First experience in the garden is go, oh no, I need to hide myself, even from people we know love us. And so learning how to deal with the isolation that we've been living in, learning how to understand, oh, I have been passive my entire life. I have used passivity as a way to keep myself safe, and how that is not serving me and how I can undo that in my life. That's another section of the book. And then the last one is, I have so much pain from my past that I have left unacknowledged, because pain is not behind us, it's inside of us. Our past is not behind us. Our past is inside of us.
That's great.
And when there's pain in your past, it's inside of you. And that needs addressing, it needs time, attention, and it needs healing. And so being able to recognize each of these and address them within the context of community and your relationship with the Lord is really what's going to start to crumble the porn's foundations in your life.
This is amazing.
That's great.
So y'all, the sad part is that the podcast has to end. The good news is that Jenna and Aaron both do one-on-one coaching and couple coaching. So would you guys tell them where they can find you?
And where do they buy the book? Where's the best place to go buy the book?
Moralrevolution.com for sure.
That's the second best place.
Amazon, as you can get it there. Leave a review. That'd be very helpful. Yes,
Keep
thank
going.
you.
I was like, I'm a cuter man.
Buy it on Amazon so that when you give a review, it's validated.
Yes, that's the ticket right there. But we have a website called zintsquad.com. That's our last name, ZINT squad.com.
And we also have a podcast.
We do have a podcast called Marriage Lab. You can check that out anywhere they have podcasts. On our website, that's where you can book couples coaching, individual one-on-one coaching, as well as sign up for Jenna has different courses. She's a habit coach and just radically changing people's lives.
When does the financial coaching from Aaron Zint start?
When I figure it all out.
That's what we all need. Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks, Jenna and Aaron, and you guys can connect with them there. We'll have it all in the show notes.
Thank you guys for listening. If you want to learn more and check out all of our awesome content, be sure to head to our website at moralrevolution.com and our socials, Instagram, Facebook, all of them. But before you leave, don't forget to like, review, subscribe, all of the things. We want you guys to come back and join us. We enjoyed having you. See you next time.